Okay, so today we're going to talk about Borrelia and autism from diagnosis to neurotoxin elimination. And unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity to look at everybody else's slides before we come in, so bear with me. Some of this is going to be a little bit of a repeat, but it's good to reinforce also from this morning's speakers. Okay, and please note, especially for parents that are in here or watching on the internet, the following information is based on research and experience of myself and others. This is not FDA approved, AMA approved, American Academy of Family Practice approved, American Academy of Pediatrics approved, and it's not approved by any other government entity for some of the treatments we're going to talk about today. Please don't go home and just try all of these things at once unless you're under the care of a competent, experienced physician, because some of these can actually cause problems with the children. Okay. So this is our cat in the middle. He has Lyme on the brain, if you see that. I thought this is a great picture on the internet. And of course, we hear from lots of our colleagues, those doctors who think the autistic spectrum kids with Lyme disease are crazy. But are they really onto something? Because there is a subpopulation that we're very concerned about. So today we're going to talk about the brief review of the autism medical issues that are going on, and they're actually very complicated. And what we're going to try to cover in that 15-minute segment is what they do in a 3-day, what's called a DAN conference to the Autism Research Institute. So I know it's going to be a review for many of you, but other ones kind of bear with me because we're going to just touch on the important features. We're going to discuss the transmission routes of Borrelia, which we have already had a little bit of that this morning. The standard testing for Borrelia is definitely not optimal, as you already know also. We're going to discuss different neurotoxin issues and combating the Borrelia neurotoxin itself. So, the difficult part first. Okay, well, we do have a genetic predisposition. There is not one gene, as you all know, that says you have autism. There are many, many different genes that are affected, that are turned on. We've got that epigenetics involved with everybody. There's a different ability to handle toxins, and this is due to when, how, and how much exposure has occurred. And we're talking about the Lyme neurotoxin. We're talking about different metals, different pesticides, many different things, which I'll show you some examples of today. We're also talking about immune system dysregulation and the other toxin issues. So think about a toxin pot. You have this big pot, and you start pouring stuff in there. Got a little bit of plastics in there. Maybe the baby bottle had a little plastic liner, so we got some plastic into the baby. Pesticides. Well, when you're pregnant, maybe you had some apples, and of course, I think it's the USDA says there are about 10 pesticides on non-organic apples, and there are 37 different chemicals out there. So you got a lot of that in your body too. Perhaps we had some metal exposure, some antimony from the mattresses, or thimerosal from the Rogam shot years ago, or the influenza vaccine. Different food additives, food dyes, medications, and different chemicals or toxins from different infections. And unfortunately, as this toxin pot overflows, we get different symptoms. We get loss of eye contact. We get loss of language. We get children, you can't turn on the bathroom fan. You can't use a vacuum cleaner because they just cover their ears. The sensory input is just awful for them. So let's talk a little bit about the biochemistry. Now, don't let this scare you, especially for people who don't know a lot about biochemistry. This is where a lot of the research has focused on for our children. And of course, there are many other pathways too, but this is a very important one. It has 3 different main segments to that. The first one is the folate cycle. This is where you take folate and convert it into folinic acid. A lot of our children actually can't do this, and you can measure this through the MTHFR enzyme system. About 70% of the kids in my practice actually have difficulty with this particular area, so we can bypass that particular segment. We also have difficulties with the methionine cycle. Now, methionine gets converted through the cycle down into homocysteine. Well, why is that important? We make proteins, we make catecholamines, we make our cyclic AMP, which is the energy for all of our cells. And then, of course, we have the transsulfuration cycle, which goes from homocysteine down through cysteine and cysteine all the way down to glutathione, which unfortunately is not showing up on the slide. At the very bottom, we're going to talk about glutathione, which is on our next slide. Now, why is glutathione important? I'm sure, so how many people in the audience have heard of glutathione? So you got a little bit familiar with that in the oxidative stress. Well, it has 5 different very important functions. It's a major antioxidant. It helps your immune system. It is in the mitochondrial membrane, so that can help those function a little bit better. It's in the gut epithelium, okay? So it's in your intestinal tract. And it's in your detox pathways. So if you're going to New York City on New Year's Eve and you're sitting in traffic and you're trying to get there, you want to party with everybody else, and you're breathing in all the car exhaust, your glutathione better be working. You have to detox that out of your body. Okay, so I'm just going to put it into more of a simplistic event or series for everybody, a cascade of events. So I want you to think about it this way. If we look at it as in a process of steps, although all these steps can happen all together or multiple different times. The first thing we're going to have is some type of toxin exposure. So this could be prenatally, of course, this could be a Lyme infection. This could be, of course, mom has many amalgams, and there have been studies, if you look in the literature, linking the mercury and the silver and all the other components of the amalgams that can show up in the placenta that the baby can get. We have the postnatal exposure, of course. You know, everybody gets their vitamin K shot, and some people had hepatitis B shot when they were born. So you look at all these different factors. This is an example of one of the patients in my practice where we actually looked at different toxin exposure. This is called a urine porphyrin test. Now, in this test, it doesn't tell you that you have 50 micrograms of mercury or 25 micrograms of lead. It actually tells you, do you have an exposure history? Is that enzyme system working or not? If you look at the coproporphyrins 1 and 3, when those are elevated, that can indicate lead exposure that was very high to shut down that enzyme system. It can indicate mercury exposure. The ones above that can also lead to mercury exposure. So when you have that, you really need to take that into account with the kids. Those toxins are in the body, but they're working on different enzymes. And how many other enzyme systems are affected with the kids? We do challenge tests for different types of metals. Of course, you have a baseline, and everybody says, well, can I just get a test today? I want to see how much lead I have in my body, how much antimony do I have in my body. Well, if we get a urine, a stool, and a blood test today, it's going to tell us about today or a couple days ago. It's not going to tell us about 6 months ago. It's not going to tell us about a couple years ago. So we do what's called a challenge test. We give a binding agent. We put it in the body, and then we measure one of these entities coming out. So this is an example of one of my male patients who was about 7 when he had this done, and his antimony is across the chart. That doesn't belong in there, and where did it come from? Here's an example of a urinary metal test. We've got aluminum coming out, arsenic. Look at our lead across the board. This is a 6-year-old little girl. Since she has been detoxing this, and her numbers are slowly coming down, she's doing so much better. We have better language. We have better social interaction with other kids. It's actually very exciting to see this happen.